Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the FRR Radio. Today we have another external guest. This is Isaac Perry, one of our alumni. He originally studied our level 3 fashion retail course and then stayed on to do our marketing degree, and we're basically just going to be talking about his journey at the FRA, but then also focus on his journey after the FRA and into employment, and how that is quite a shift and how you guys can relate to his experience and gain some advice.
Much. It's my first ever podcast.
So. Oh, really?
Yeah, it's my first ever one, so I'm very excited to film this.
And this is where you came, and this is your first podcast?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I went to the previous location, but so it feels very, very fresh, this location, and obviously doing a podcast for the first time, it's nice to be somewhere fresh.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, so talk me through your level 3. What year did you do that? Obviously, it was in the old building, so things were different back then. What was your level 3 like?
So level 3 was amazing, to be honest. It was one of them ones where I left school and I was looking into it before I left school. I was like, what do I want to do? And I'm a massive believer in like following your passions and following your interests. I'm not really here for kind of chasing money or any of that kind of vibe. So when it came to kind of looking at careers after, I kind of was always into fashion, and my mum was a massive part of that. For me, it was kind of super important to follow that passion, and kind of growing up with her, I kind of looked into that route. And to be honest, I didn't find the Fashion Retail Academy. My best friend from school did, and I actually ended up coming here with her, and we were in level 3 together. It was amazing, and I remember back in the day, whereas now it would all be on computers, but I turned up and the pitch to get in was I had to create like a printed board of a brand which I'd come up with in a marketing strategy, and that was all to get in. And then you kind of come here with the understanding of like marketing's a career. And it's really nice. Now I look back, I'm like, wow, I actually just thought marketing was a career. And it's quite funny to look back and think that now. So I kind of came here and I learned all the different areas. Yeah. So level 3 fashion business and retail takes you through like everything. Like it takes you through buying, it takes you through merchandising, it takes you through garment technology. It takes you through, including like social media and the other bits and pieces, but it takes you through every area. So like if you come here and you are naive like me at the time when I was like 15, 16, it's really, really beneficial and helps you kind of learn and delve into where you actually want to go. And
yeah, certainly.
And the further into it you go, you can like, second year, for instance, people were doing projects on design. Yeah. And people were also doing projects on marketing. So it was so many different creatives in the class. It was really, really interesting.
So you'd say doing the level 3 definitely like established that marketing was the next route you wanted to do?
Yeah, 100%.
Did you ever consider buying or anything?
For me, I'm really interested in the human psyche, and it's a really weird thing, but I love understanding like people's buying habits and why people engage with things in certain ways. So for me, I always kind of knew roughly that I wanted to go down a sales-led route. Mm-hmm. So I'd say from the offset for me, marketing was super important. But my friend who I mentioned, she's now a designer. So it's so completely different routes. We've done the exact same course, and she's doing great in her field, and I'd like to say I'm doing great in my field as well. So it's super interesting to see how everyone can go in such different directions.
Definitely. So when you were coming to the end of your level 3 and you were thinking about your next steps, were you thinking about full-time work, or what made you essentially go for a degree here at the FRA as well? Did you look at other universities?
So I looked into, taking it back a few years now, I looked into the London College of Fashion. That was an option for me at the time. But for me, the reason I chose to kind of stay on was because during the level 3, I done a work placement. And I started working 3 days a week alongside the course. Right. So I'd done this from late 16 to kind of just as I was turning 17, let's say. So I was working 3 days a week alongside it. And when I looked at my other university options, I was like, I don't think I'd be able to work part-time, gaining the industry experience, which I was getting at the time. So then when the degree was kind of something that was offered, and it was quite fresh when I started it. I think I was maybe year 2, or I was very, very fresh to the degree. It just made sense and worked with my kind of current setup. So
the 2-day-a-week module.
Yeah, so I was getting the best of both worlds with 2 days a week here, studying with kind of industry experts and some like you're a student here as well, aren't you? Some of the most like influential people who have kind of worked within the industry.
Yeah.
And then I was also going into industry in my other 3 days. So for me, it just gelled really well. So I wanted to continue that.
Yeah.
Just because my trajectory was going quite well. So I didn't want to kind of go into something else and potentially mess that up.
I see what you mean. We've got our, a little off topic, but we've got our level 3s going into their work placement now. So what would you recommend or advice for going into your work placement and potentially getting a role after to go alongside your studies? Because that's an amazing deal that you got part-time work there. How did you do that, essentially?
So for me, I think with everything, I just throw myself into the deep end. I'm someone who wants just to throw stuff at me and I'll try and make it work. Like I'll do my best to make it work. If I don't, I'll try and work out why it didn't work. But for me, it was just, I was getting there early, I was leaving late, I was doing everything and anything that I was asked to do. Like no job was too small and every job was just perfect for me. Like if they wanted me to run stuff to the post office, because it was quite a small startup at the time, I would be sprinting to that post office. So for me, it's just really going in and just throwing yourself into it and just not kind of going in just with that logic of I'm a student, I'm just here to shadow, I'm just here to do this. I'd make like, do you want me to tidy this? Do you want me to do this? Do you want me to, I don't know, even go and get like coffee runs? I know it's a bit of an industry stereotype that no one wants to do the coffee run, but like even stuff like that, like for me, that's just how I kind of worked my way into the industry and just I wanted to do everything and I wanted to help as much as I could.
But it's how you stand out as well, and they obviously remembered that, and then that is what they wanted you to stay on because of that, and they saw your enthusiasm. So what would you say your key takeaways were from the FRA, your level 3 and your degree?
My key takeaways, for me, one of the massive things, and I take this kind of theory through life, not just kind of myself, like business and stuff, but it's like nice people get like nice things back. Like, so if you're nice, what you put out, you get back.
100%.
And so for me, I kind of learned that through a lot of the tutors and stuff, like just through being myself and just, I'd like to say I'm a good human, just speaking to my level and just really wanting to develop and improve, and like at all points I wanted to improve. I was that guy who would stay at the end of class and I'd ask questions and I'd want to understand how I can kind of be the best person going into industry. So for me, it was like just being nice to people was one of my big takeaways, because that got me to what I got a first in my college course and I got a 2-1 in my degree. So that for me just kind of led me to get those grades, which I'd like to say were quite good. Another takeaway would be, takeaways are always hard, aren't they, when you're kind of reminiscing back. But
what about your confidence? Did both courses, give you a lot of confidence in yourself? Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. I mean, the courses, when you come to London as a 16-year-old countryside boy, you don't necessarily have that kind of like street savvy. Yeah, you're not particularly streetwise. You're kind of just someone who like turns up and thinks you're in like the Big Apple. Like you think you're in the coolest place in the world. So it was just like coming here, it kind of just really develops you as a person and just you just learn an awful lot about yourself incredibly quickly. And I think like my 4 years here, so I joined at 16 and left at 20. And I genuinely joined as a boy and left as a man. So it was such a transitional period for me whilst I was here.
Definitely.
So yeah, and I just think just always be yourself as well is my number one thing. Just at all points, even if you think it's cringy asking all the questions or people are going to be like, oh, Isaac's got another question. I think just ask those questions because you're here to utilise the tutors and you're here to benefit from them. So
yeah, totally. I 100% agree. So when you were in your degree and then you were then planning your next steps, planning full-time work, how did you do this when you were in your degree?
So I, as I said, worked alongside my degree.
Right.
So I worked part-time, as much as it was basically full-time, alongside my degree. But for me, so it was in a small brand at the time. But I'll tell you, my end goal is basically to have my own production agency. Right. That's my personal end goal. So for me, everything I do is quite strategic towards hitting that end goal.
Okay.
So once I finished my degree,
So did you know that when you were in your degree?
Yeah, I'm quite ambitious. Yeah. So for me, that's kind of I'm a very goals orientated person. So for me, that's like my end goal. So everything I do towards that's quite strategic. There's quite strategic like method behind it. So like after that, I went to a marketing agency, and done kind of they called it a cycle. So basically you join and for 12 months, and you do 3 months in one team, 3 months in another team, 3 months in another team, so on. So I'd done that, and I got to work on some amazing accounts. So I worked on the Renault account, Costa account, a Sunbelt Rentals account, which is kind of, it sounds very boring, it's construction, but very, very interesting and one of the most creative roles I've actually had. So working in kind of a marketing agency was such great exposure to all these different brands and working with a vast amount of people with different skill sets. So for me, that was kind of my next thing after working in quite a small company that I really wanted to hit the nail on the head with that, because I was like, I want to go here and learn about how agency does truly work. And for me personally, to any students out there, I couldn't recommend that experience anymore.
So you recommend when they're looking for their jobs that they look for smaller, even startups, because you just gain so much more knowledge?
I'd personally say in your first steps of your career, startups are phenomenal. Like, they're amazing because you're doing so much. And for me personally, this is just how I find it work. I would always recommend a small company, and agency world is so like amazing. That is, I'd highly
because I've heard
recommend
some horror
it.
stories about agencies.
Quite an early thing that I got told was you're either a brand person or an agency person.
Right.
I've really enjoyed both. I may have to try agency again to kind of to maybe get some of the horror stories, but for me, I've really enjoyed both, and I would highly recommend working in a small company and a big company, so you get both sides of it. Yeah,
because everyone's different, aren't they? 100%. Everyone's got a different opinion.
100%.
I think you're right. I think going for both is a good idea. I think going for a smaller company, I think when you're young and have little experience, you think you're more likely to get noticed by these small companies rather than the big corporations, would you say?
Yeah, I'd say so, to be completely transparent with you. That was quite a big reason as to why I think I was at the place I was originally at for just shy. I was there for 3 years.
Wow, that's quite a long time,
Yeah. So I'd say for me that was quite a big reason, because you're just doing, I was running shoots on my own at like 17, 18, and it's like, if I go to where I am now, Asos, it's like the reality of an 18-year-old running a shoot on their own is very, very small. Yeah. Very, like, I'd say there's a 1% chance of something along those lines happening. So, like, when you're in a smaller place, you get those opportunities, and it's all on you, and you kind of, I'd say it's a fight or flight kind of thing. So,
I see what you mean, yeah.
But yeah, small company is very beneficial.
When you were here and you were thinking of your next steps, were the teachers here, did they help? How did they help? Did you look at your CV? Did you show that to anybody? Did you have any help with interview prep, things like that?
So I was incredibly close to a few teachers who they're not here anymore, but at the time in my degree, they kind of massively helped me. Grant, who's here actually still, he was a massive part of it as well. But I definitely had that CV help, that interview help, and I think, to be honest, as much as I've never had a pure conversation of, oh, this is interview prep or this is this. You're prepared for it. You're the whole way through the FRA, like. At every stage, you're basically being prepped for the industry. So even from presentations, you come in and I used to dress professional for my presentations. I used to give my presentations like I was presenting a campaign idea or a brand pitch or something along those lines. So for me, from 16 to 20, I was being prepared for industry from start to end.
Definitely. What would you say is the shift? Like, what is the shift like from uni, from education into the full-time working world?
So for me, I always was dying to dive into the working world. If you speak to the tutors who I was here with, they'll know I was ready and raring to go at 17. I wanted to be in industry. Like it was, to be honest, from the time I joined here, it was my dream to just join the industry in marketing. Still this thing that didn't exist, like was whatever. So for me, I just think it's the biggest difference. I think the biggest difference between industry is you put an awful lot at university, an awful lot of pressure on yourself, and I think it's very easy I've done it, and I speak to students now who do the exact same, and you kind of build this big idea that's incorrect reality of kind of what industry is sometimes, and it's like for instance, Devil Wears Prada. Everyone thinks it's going to be this Mel Street, like this cutthroat killer industry, and it's not. It's don't get me wrong, that it has its moments where you're stressed and you're very busy and you're working late or you're getting to work early, but it's a beautiful industry that genuinely I could not recommend highly enough. Like, my cousin's studying here. Like, literally, I recommended it to my cousin who's studying here. I recommended it to my brother's best friend who now works with me at Asos. He came here and he's now at Asos. So
it's crazy.
It's an amazing industry.
So talk to me about your career journey since leaving the FRA and all the roles you've done.
For sure. So I, as I said, was at a small startup.
When did you graduate the FRA?
2020.
Okay.
So 2020. Yeah, 2020. I was one of the COVID gang. So 2020 I graduated. As I said, I joined the marketing agency following some part-time work with the startup. So I was there for a year and a half. Some of these dates might be a little bit skewed, but I was there for a year and a half. And then I was there, and originally, as I said, I was there on a cycle. So I'd done 6 months. Then I got approached for a brand executive role on a construction account, which, as I said, was super interesting, super creative. And to be honest, I feel like that 6 month period was probably my most beneficial kind of period within that 16 to 22.
Yeah.
Like, it was an amazing experience, and I worked under a boss who was, I've never had a boss like another level of boss. Like,
really? In what way? What do you mean by that?
He was just productive like you've never seen. Like, there's probably 4 people I've ever worked in the industry who genuinely like blow my mind.
Yeah.
And he was the first one that I was like, wow.
Oh,
like,
that's so nice.
You are unbelievable.
Yeah, very inspiring.
Yeah, very, very inspiring. And he was just unbelievable. And then following that, I got approached to go back to the startup. So it was a jewelry brand called Serge Denim. So I went back there as a creative content manager, was there for a year and a half, and then unfortunately left there.
What sort of things did you do in your role there?
So I basically ran the full content stream. So I always used to say anything customer facing, which you see, which is coming from the brand, I was kind of leading on. So campaign imagery, paid media imagery, website imagery, everything from a visual perspective, I was more or less leading on.
And that is so much, big. I'm sure at Asos you have a team for each of those. Yeah, no, it was quite a big responsibility. Yeah.
But I loved it. Yeah. It was an absolutely great role, and I really appreciate my time there. And it was just super creative. I love being creative and love being around creative people. So I cannot complain about my industry experience up to that point. Then following that, I went on a fixed term contract actually. So I joined a fixed term contract at the agency I was previously on.
Right.
And I was on the Superdrug account, which was super, super interesting. Again, some amazing people on the account. It was probably one of the best teams I've worked on. They were a really, really great team. And there we were managing kind of everything print based. So when you're walking down Superdrug and you see the aisles printed and all that kind of fun stuff. So we worked there. So that was my kind of first experience outside of the digital world, which was quite, it was, when you're so social and digital focused, it was quite weird to go into an account management role on a print focused basis. But it was great. Like, every experience is good experience. I like to say.
Yeah, you seem like you've got a lot of experience in different areas of marketing. Like, I know construction isn't what you want to do, but the skills that you learned there are so transferable.
100%.
And it doesn't matter essentially where you ended up, you still managed to get where you wanted to in the end.
Yeah, 100%.
So do you think some people might get a bit disheartened maybe sometimes when like their dream roles, they don't always get it, but there is kind of that dream role, just not in fashion marketing maybe? Would you say still go for that because you're still going to learn skills that you can then take onto that dream job that will eventually come up?
Yeah, 100%. I 100%, like I said, I've worked on some accounts that, like, when I was 16, I joined the Fashion Retail Academy. I thought, I'm going to work with all the big names. I'm going to work with all these amazing people. And over time, it just changes. Like, now as a 24-year-old man, I've worked with Costa, Renault, Puma, Serge Denim, which is a smaller one, the Inspired Thinking Group, which in the marketing world are absolutely massive, Sunbelt Rentals, who are bigger than most of the companies I've just mentioned in the construction world, and if you're driving down the road you will probably see some of their kit. Like, just look for a big green sign and it will say Sunbelt Rentals. And now obviously I'm working with Asos, and I think all experience is so valuable. And working on Costa accounts and Renault accounts and Sunbelt accounts, that was some of my they were my early foundations.
Yeah.
And for me, like, I'm now working at Asos, which, don't get me wrong, is an absolute dream, but I've got my job at Asos through the foundations that was so important. So I wouldn't ever shut yourself off to any kind of experience, because it's all great experience.
Yeah, definitely. So after the agency, is that when you then found the Asos role?
I had one more role in between that. Yeah, one more role in between that. So I went to a company called Slick Gorilla. So a men's hair company. I was there for a year. And then I eventually fell into my dream role at Asos. So I'm very, very happy about that.
And was that sort of like, you took on the Slick Gorilla role with intention of then moving again to a bigger company?
Yeah, so I was on a fixed term contract at the agency prior to Slick Gorilla, and I kind of wanted a more full-time role.
Yeah.
And then I went to Slick Gorilla, and I always said, like, if the right role Slick Gorilla, don't get me wrong, it was an amazing company and it was great to work for them. Great team, like what they're doing in the hair space is so impressive, and I have nothing but amazing memories of Slick Gorilla. But for me, Asos was always
on your top
list. It was always that.
Yeah.
It was always the one where I was like, one day I'm going to end up there. And obviously I've ended up there, which I'm very, very happy about.
You manifested it.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, massively. Yeah.
So talk to me about your role now.
So I'm a social integrated producer. So effectively, it's more or less a project manager. So the social team in Asos will come to me and they'll say, we want to shoot 5 different concepts, and how can we get from A to Z? And it's me and my fellow colleague called Alex. It's our roles to basically get them from A to Z.
Wow.
And getting the project from non-existent to live on all social platforms.
Wow. Okay, so that's quite a lot.
It's fun though. It's fun. It's very, very fun.
Is that always where you wanted to end up at Asos, this type of role? Because before you mentioned that, I didn't even know that role was really a thing.
So neither did I.
Yeah.
So
I've never heard of it.
Yeah. So neither did I. So I always worked in the content, social, and production space. Like, obviously, you're producing stuff and everyone's heard of a generic producer.
Yeah.
Like you're just, again, like a project manager essentially from A to Z. You produce stuff. But I'd never heard specifically of a social-based producer. So when I was looking and the role came up, I was like, oh, I'm not a producer. Then I read the job description, I was like, you know, in your ears like twinge. Yeah. I was like, so that sounds like something I could really do. And it just everything about we want this and we want this and we want this. I was just ticking boxes in my head, and I was like, okay. So I just threw my hat into the ring. I was like, I'll put my name out there and just see. And
what's the worst that's going to happen?
Yeah, exactly. And I always say the worst anyone can say is no.
Exactly.
Like, and it's, if worst comes to worst, I'm at a company which I like, and it's not the end of the world. And yeah, I got the call up for an interview, and I was like, oh wow, like, oh, this could actually happen. Then second stage comes, and you're like, oh god, this could actually happen. So it's kind of, interviews are a nervy thing, but they're a cool thing to do, and like even the task I got to do for Asos was like super fun. So it was, the whole process was just great, and now obviously to end up in the role was just even better.
I imagine the interview process for Asos was like one like no other you've done before.
Yeah.
Because it was probably much more lengthy. Like you say, you had to do a task and things. What would be your advice for people who are looking to go for these bigger companies and their interview stages? What advice would you give for the process?
I think firstly, don't be disheartened if you don't get interviews initially. Because when I say I was applying, I'd done work experience at Asos when I was 16 for 3 days, and I've wanted to work there since. I've been applying for roles at Asos for about 8 years.
Wow.
So I was very persistent. I wasn't just applying for any and every role.
Roles that aligned with you.
Roles that are very aligned with me, but for me, with interviews, like, don't be disheartened. Like, I've been turned down for probably 10 plus jobs at ASOS. Like, it kind of is the reality. The market's so competitive. But for me, I think just going on to interviews, just be unapologetically yourself, and just, people can read through the lies, and people can read through any cringy lines that you've stolen off TikTok and all that kind of stuff. So I think just go in and just genuinely just speak your truth and just speak about your experience, and just try and gel with the people. They want to know who you are as a person, and a lot of the time, like if someone can be great, but if they're not a personality fit for the team, then it's never going to work, unfortunately. So I think just go in, just speak your truth, and just do the best you can. If you come out of it happy with yourself, then what have you really got to complain about?
When you were on your job hunting process, did you use LinkedIn?
Yes, LinkedIn was the GOAT.
And how do you recommend our students use LinkedIn to its best abilities? Or how did you use it first? And then we'll go on to your tips that you learned.
For sure. So I done a speech here probably about 2 weeks ago, and I always reference, and I'll give him a shout out on the podcast, a guy called Dan Ramsdale. He, when we were at college, was the best person, was the best person on LinkedIn. And we all used to be like, why are you going so ham on LinkedIn? Like, why are you using it so much? And then when he started to get to know people, and his project started to have the marketing director from Converse and the marketing director from Depop and all these big names popping up, he was like, oh, it's LinkedIn guys. And we were like, God. I'm not saying we were too late to the party, because he'd kind of already got projects under his belt with them. But he used it so efficiently and so well during our time at college. It was so impressive. So for me, I use it as a platform to reach out and just appreciate.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like, I think everyone has this perception in their head of, hi, how are you? Hope you're doing well. Like all this kind of stuff where it's like super professional, whereas the business world is actually, as much as you have to be professional, it's very laid back.
Yeah.
Like I message people, I'm just like, hey, absolutely love your work. This project you done recently, you absolutely killed it.
Yeah, it's real life people, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
We're not all robots.
No. So for me, I use it in that capacity. I'm just like, if I like someone's work, if I want to reshare something, or if something just genuinely impresses me, I'll just put it out there, and it just kind of, it builds a personality and it builds a person behind the LinkedIn profile.
Yeah.
So for me, I just say, and I said it to the students recently, just reach out to people.
Yeah.
And I've actually had a few reach out to me since
really?
I've said that. Yeah, I have actually had a few reach out just with questions for projects and stuff. And I just think it's so important. And even messaging people now, it's just building the foundations.
Yeah.
And if you want to meet them for a coffee, or you want to meet them for like, hey, can I come and shadow you for a day?
Yeah.
Like people will do that for you.
Yeah.
So I think just make sure that you kind of utilize that platform the best you can.
Yeah, definitely. I think sometimes people think like, oh, it's like, what's the point? When people say connect with people, it's like, but what does that actually mean? And it's like, you sort of build the relationship through messaging, and then nothing might come of it. But in a year's time, you might see that person again, and then they will remember that you had previously made a connection.
Exactly.
I think it's the fashion industry, I'm sure you know, is so small.
Yeah.
And it is like a lot of word of mouth and who you know. And I think that's where LinkedIn is a really great tool.
100%.
Do you think?
Yeah, 100%. And like you said, like what you just said there, the fashion industry being small is the perfect way to phrase it. Like I have so many people who are mutual friends through mutual friends.
Really?
And yeah,
Wow.
it's just like you join these places and instantly it's like, oh, you know this person, oh, you know this person, oh, I worked with them on this. And so it's just there's all connections.
Yeah.
And I think if you just start connecting with people on LinkedIn and just starting those conversations, when you do join the industry, they'll be like, oh, that's Megan, or oh, that's Isaac, I spoke to you on LinkedIn once. And people just remember those small interactions.
Definitely. What would be your advice? It's quite like a stereotype when graduates are looking for jobs that there's just not enough jobs. There's tons of graduates looking for jobs. Everyone's just graduated with the same degree. The competition is like so high. How would you recommend standing out from that competition?
So it kind of follows the LinkedIn conversation, to be honest. I'd starting early.
Right, okay.
Really starting to build your network nice and early. And so that when you do kind of enter industry, the people who you've been speaking to aren't people you've messaged for a week.
Yeah.
And then you're saying, hey, don't suppose you've got a work placement for me, or don't suppose you can sort me out a job. Or these are people you've been speaking to for a year, or a year and a half, depending on when you start. So saying, not necessarily asking for a favour, but like asking for advice or meeting them for a coffee. A 1 year relationship is so different to a 1 day or 2 day relationship.
Yeah,
so right. I think start early. And
when you say start early, would you say first year degree, second year in your degree?
I'd say start making yourself an online persona in year one.
Right, okay.
And then begin to focus on your studies for year one, but build that online persona. And year two, I think ramp
Go
up
for
the,
it. Yeah.
start speaking to people, and because you have like FMPs and stuff, which is so important, and getting quotes from people in industry will only benefit them as well. So it's kind of it benefits you in both ways.
Okay. Any last advice? Can be completely random for the FRA students here, particularly our degree students who are going to be graduating in August, who are going to be looking for roles. Do you have any advice on, if I said to you, I've got no idea what I want to do, I like marketing, but I've got no idea what I want to do, what would you advise me to do?
Just try anything you can.
Okay.
Just give it a
work
go.
experience.
Anything in the work experience world, even if it's shadowing people, just try. If you want to try it, like stylings are such an amazing thing, and stylists are always looking for assistants. Reach out to a stylist and they could connect you to someone within a fashion house. Like, reach out and just be willing to do anything, because you can join and you can have this perception of what you think you want to do, but people chop and change all the time.
Yeah.
Like, we have people at Asos who I know that are changing teams at 25, 26, 27 into completely different roles.
Yeah.
So I think it's just so important to try what you can, and a foot in the door is a foot in the door. So I think just enter industry with that logic and just speak to people.
What is there anything that you would want to go back and tell your younger self when you were here at the FRA? Is there anything you'd want to tell yourself?
Anything I'd want to tell myself? Find what makes you tick.
Right.
For me, I'm a massive believer in everyone has different workplaces where they can thrive. Everyone has different workplaces where they cannot thrive. And for me, I know that consistency is a massive thing, not even in workload, not even in anything else, in people. So for me, if I'm super consistent, I'm the same with you as I am with the cleaner, as I am with the person behind the cafeteria, as I am with the marketing director. I think consistency for me works, but just find what makes you tick and just try and work within that, try and work to that and understand what makes you tick. Because I think sometimes earlier on in my career, I found myself confused or not necessarily understanding why certain things went certain ways, or if certain people were being like, were they being funny with me or were they not being funny with me? So I think just understand what makes you tick, and I think you'll be absolutely fine.
Okay, thank you so much for this episode. I think all your advice has been so valuable, as always. I've heard a few of Isaac's masterclasses and they're always so good. I just feel like you're super clear in what you say.
Thank you.
And I feel like it's very easy to understand, so I'm sure our students are going to enjoy this, especially as it's coming out at a right time, because obviously people are thinking about their next steps now. Our year 2 students are going to be graduating soon in August. So thank you very much for joining me on the podcast today, and I will see you guys next Friday for another episode.